this time, and we'll go from there. So what I was doing is I was highlighting, my name is Jo, and I've been working online. We've got Mike in the chat as well, who's going to help us. We do have some online tools that we can use. Please make sure you wiggle your mouse, and at the bottom of the screen you open up your participant panel, because in there we've got the raise hand. We're not going to use that. I've actually unmuted, I've muted all of you now, so we're going to keep that on mute just so we don't have the problem that we had before. But what we can do is we can use the tick and the cross. So have a go and click on that for me, please. Click on the tick, click on the cross, whichever one you prefer, and I will have a look at those. We can see those coming up in that participant panel, which is absolutely great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so thank you. I can clear all of those. We can use those anytime. And also what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at our agenda, the challenges we've got. Well, we've just experienced one with that Zoom bombing. Also what we've got are some tips on how we can kind of work through all these kind of challenges, how we can engage in webinars and get over them not seeing people. Okay, so thank you very much for that. What we're going to do is also use the chat window. Wiggle your mouse, make sure you've got your chat window open. Really important if you can, because we are going to use this for interaction, for chat, for asking me questions and questions of each other. So please make sure you've got that open and set that to everyone, and then everyone can see what's going on. So first of all, let's jump in with this very first question in chat, please. What are the kind of challenges we have of working and learning remotely? So Zara, thank you. You'll do the thumbs up instead. That's absolutely great. Thank you very much. What are some of the challenges that we have? Yeah, focus, feeling isolated. And we've just experienced, as Joan said, internet security and the technology. I've never been Zoom bombed before either, so it was an experience and hopefully one never to be repeated. So what other challenges do we have thinking about working and learning remotely? We're in a very specific context at the moment with what's going on with COVID-19. So having my toddler in the room, oh, Natalie, I'm sure that's lovely most of the time, but some of the time challenging. The networks are being hammered, absolutely. That's why I haven't got my webcam on right now. Troubleshooting when you can't see what's going on. If people actually learn anything and they're challenged, it can be difficult to tell sometimes. The time has shrunk. So Visma, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but today on our session, our time has shrunk. So we've just dealt with a whole load of issues. So not seeing people's faces, feeling isolated and switching off, all sorts of challenges that we've got here. What we find is that there are lots of different challenges, and they're different depending on your country, your industry, the organisation, all sorts of other factors too. So there can be things like getting used to the technology when sometimes we don't really want to, quite frankly. We have to get over that issue of not seeing each other. Even though with Zoom and other platforms we have video, the networks are finding that hard to cope with at the moment. Also, even though people might be experienced trainers, not knowing how to deliver online and ensure those learning and performance outcomes that you normally get face-to-face can be a challenge as well. And also, likewise, we have to design for new modalities. If we are in meetings or webinars or virtual classrooms, it can be challenging in those different instances. There can be some huge time pressures as well. So we're going to use some annotation tools. Please go and wiggle your mouse, go to the top of the screen where it says view options. And what you should be able to do, please, is turn on your annotation tools. And hopefully we've got lots of good people here. And what we will be able to do is use our annotation tools for good rather than evil. Let's go and see if we can use that text tool. Click on the screen, type your name, click again, and it should reveal it for everyone. And if you practice with something else, generally that's not a big problem, don't worry about it. But what I'd like you to do, please, is go and use that T-text tool, write your name on the screen, and we'll check that that's working for you. So Anne, thank you. Adi, hello. Joan, Victoria, Annette, Liz, Mary, Jane, hello as well. This is all looking really good. We do have other things like the drawing tools, and we will use other tools later on. Just change colours, says somebody. Yep, you can click a little bit later on. You can go and change those colours if you want to. Let me go and clear all of these because I'd like to ask you a question and I'd like you to go and answer, please, in one word on the whiteboard. What describes your current working environment? One word on the whiteboard. What describes your current working environment? In other words, where are you? What's the setup like? So if you're on a mobile phone, you might not have the text tool. You might want to be using your draw tool instead. What's one word that describes your working environment? The shed, we've got a couple of people in the shed, or home office, a couple of you. Some of you are cozy, which is nice. As Lee said earlier on when we were chatting, that she's over socialized, having that video on all the time. Somebody's at the kitchen table, somebody's working from home. I'm not sure what the top right is supposed to be, that writing. I can see BECT, I can't see the rest, but hopefully something will come up. Comfortable is nice. Melanie says, I don't have that tool option. No worries, Melanie. You're in a cold extra bedroom. Oh, I'm sorry, it is cold. That is no good whatsoever. And we've got a window table looking at some lovely hills. Well, that's quite nice. Oh, bed, says AD. I thought it was C and a T and it's not, it's a D. AD's working in bed. Okay, so maybe that's an idea, Melanie, is go and work in bed and you'll end up being a little bit warmer. Okay, thank you very much. So we're all in very different working environments at the moment. So in chat, what are some of the tips that you can share, please? So we're all in different situations and different environments. We all work differently. But from what you've learned this last week or two, do you have any tips for each other? So I want to kind of crowdsource a little bit of this and share some different things. What are some tips you can share on how we're working differently? So things like structuring our day, having a routine, separate work from home if we can. Matt, that's a good one. I'm lucky enough, I've got a room. I can shut the door. If you're on the kitchen table, you can't. But you might be able to put your laptop and all your work stuff away. Joan says about keeping to a routine, except she didn't get up this morning till after 9. Joan, oh, I don't know about that. But no, working with what's right for you. Keep to working hours, and a routine is important for a lot of you. And Annette, you're so right about making time for yourself. And Anne is saying taking breaks. On the whiteboard, structuring the day, taking breaks. Somebody says, I get up at 5 a.m. to do a few hours before an energetic child gets up. So that's more focused work. That's a really good one. Google Drive is good. Agile and quick is an approach. And going out, you know, that kind of once a day exercise we've got in the UK. Anne says, stop eating. I think I could take your advice there, Anne. Yeah, the fridge is not our friend. Communicating with family and all sorts of things like that. So we've got lots of different things that we can go and make sure that we are trying to focus on. And it's just about trying to get into that kind of different mindset, and keeping hydrated is really important as well. Thank you, Annette. Okay, I've got a different tool that I want us to use. If you haven't got your annotation tools on, make sure you go and switch on the annotation tools. And Joan makes a good point. A laptop isn't great. You might be bending awkwardly and hurting your neck. So maybe putting it onto a box with a keyboard or getting another screen is really good too. What we're going to use now are the stamp tools. Move your mouse over the stamp tools. You'll see there's all sorts of options, including hearts and ticks and crosses. Go and experiment with those. We can use any which one you like. So go and experiment with those. You can use any which one you like. go and use those stamp tools. Oh, we've got some lovely hearts coming through and some arrows, all sorts of things. Okay, so we've gone and used the stamp tools. We're going to use this for our next activity. So let me just go and clear all of those. I know you're being terribly creative, but let me just go and clear them. Here we go. Here is my question for you. I would like to know, please, when we are thinking about connecting with others whilst working remotely, people have been doing all sorts of things with technology. Use the star, the tick, or the heart for the ones that you've been using already. So the star, the tick, or the heart for the tactics you've been using to connect with others when working remotely. So we're using kind of positive pictures, the star or asterisk, the tick, and the heart. Which ones have you been doing? Lots of webcam. Show some of the space we're in, like, you know, are you in your shed with the various different things? Yeah, if you haven't got the tools, you can just type in chat. Thank you, Melanie. Speaking and unmuting is important. Links in chat, very good. Screen share. Non-work things. I think some of us have become a lot more sociable recently because we're sharing things like the toddler that might be running around, or the cat that's walked across your keyboard, all those kind of things. So we've got lots of ways that we can do that. Okay, let me go and clear all of these now. What I'd like to know from you next is actually use the cross or the question mark to highlight the ones where you're thinking, actually in the future I might want to do those. So use your cross or your question mark to show the future you might want to do them. And in chat, Joan says, I might be less keen to show video when I'm well past my next hair appointment. Yeah, I've got my grey coming through, Joan, so I know how you mean. And AD says, kids photobombing your webcam. It's okay for the BBC News interviews, then it's okay for us. Love it, AD. So there's quite a few things where we might be going, okay, in the future, I'm going to do maybe a little bit more of this to connect me with people. So it's to get you thinking about how you might do that even more. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody, for all of those things. And let's have a look at our next question. I want to focus a bit more now on webinars and virtual classrooms. And I'd like to know from you, please, what makes them great? So focusing on webinars, like we're doing today, and virtual classrooms, which we say have got about 10 people. It's much more like a face-to-face session. What makes them great? So what makes a great webinar or a great virtual classroom? So in the chat window, what makes a great webinar or virtual classroom? Structure, says Matt. Interaction like this, says Joan. Lots of interaction, says Mary. Melanie says an agenda and structure. Annette says interaction, getting to move about and clear agenda. Nicola says great host. Jane says the option to chat. Yeah, not everybody has that. Ashley says a good facilitator. Natalie says the right length of time. Anne says engaging interaction. Liz says chatty and conversational style of presenter. AD says high levels of interaction like this one. I was on one the other day for 2 hours. Not once was there any interaction. Oh, AD, I'm clutching at my heart. That's awful. Anne says useful content. Melanie says interaction, so you know people are there. Liz says using people's names. Joan says breaks to encourage questions from participants. Zara says interaction, being able to use different devices where possible. Annette says breakout rooms. Visma says conversation and sense of achievement. Nicola adds allowing people to join in or not, depending on how they feel. And AD says, and also in the 2-hour session, sadly, a very monotone voice. You really have to use your voice well online. What a brilliant list there, everybody. It's basically all of the stuff to do or not to do in our virtual classrooms and in our webinars. You're spot on about all of those different things. Thank you. If we didn't do the things that you are mentioning, basically, they'd be boring, exactly as AD was saying just now, quite frankly. We don't want them to be boring. We don't want them to be monotone. The whole point, thank you, Jane's just like almost falling asleep at her keyboard, just like, no, don't want them to be boring. You might fall asleep. The whole point of live online in a session is to engage people. Otherwise, why turn up? If you aren't going to engage people, then something like a video or a podcast or writing an article, a handout, a PDF, they are much better ways to get your information across. I'm not the only person here who's delivered webinars and virtual classrooms. You've all attended live online sessions before. So let's crowdsource some more ideas. In chat, please. Oh, excuse me, I nearly coughed then. What are some of the ways we can engage people in webinars? So in chat, what are some of the ways that we can engage people in webinars? So in chat, what are some of the ways that we can engage people in webinars? So what are some of the things coming through? We have questions and quizzes. Yes, really important. Using the chat box. We're doing that a lot today. Chats and polls and on-screen icons like those ticks and crosses. We've also got games and icebreakers. So that will be dependent upon your audience and the right kind of thing that you're doing for your session. Asking questions of your audience and asking for real life experiences and allowing people to talk. Yeah, I'm not doing that so much in our webinar today. In webinars, I don't tend to get people talking too much because it can be a lot to manage. But if that was a virtual classroom, absolutely spot on. Making sure they can use the tools. We have to explain them as we go along, doing activities together and collaborating on whiteboards, or get them to go and find something. Annette, that's great. I know somebody who's a scout leader and he did a Zoom meeting for the scouts, and they did a scavenger hunt in their house. Or it could be go and find something on a website, some information that you need to be finding out or working on, something like that. Seek responses as you're doing now. Unmute and speak, something I really want to practice and have confidence to do. And Jane, just going to reiterate, on a busy webinar, not so much maybe, but with less people in a virtual classroom, absolutely, I'd love you to have a go at that. Adi has said magic tricks. That can be really engaging for people. Sadly, I don't have any magic tricks for you, Adi, unless it involves gin or Prosecco. But they can be really engaging, and we can use those in order to teach people things or kind of use them as discussion points. Meet and greets. Why can we not use the annotation tools in Zoom webinars? Because of the way that the software works, Joan. So I'm going to come back to that point in a little bit. And AD says a follow-up activity, learn a bit online, go away and do something, then regroup. And that's a really good way to deal with much longer sessions, or if you've got a traditional day or 2 days that you would go and deliver and you need to break it up. So we've got lots of great stuff there. We've got to kind of summarize that on the whiteboard. So thank you very much for all of those different ideas that you've come up with there. With webinars, whether it's for 30 plus people, you know, we've got 22 of you here today, or hundreds or more, obviously we can still get engagement. We're doing that today. There are two key things we have to think about. There's what can the technology let you do with regards to the number of people you have, and there's what do you want people to do after the session. I want to have a look on these in a little bit more detail. So knowing the technology is imperative, and that's kind of exactly what Joan was just asking about, is why can't we use the annotation tools in Zoom webinars? So what we've got here today is Zoom meetings, and we've switched it on so that you all can use the annotation tools, and you can go and squiggle on the whiteboard whenever you want. But Zoom webinars, the annotation tools are only for the host. It's not for the attendees. Otherwise you get, quite frankly, a little bit of that Zoom bombing issue that we had. You might get people doing all sorts of things all over the place. So that's where there's that limitation. What Zoom have decided is with your webinar where you might have 500 or 1,000 people, it's not appropriate for you to actually go and use the whiteboard tools for absolutely everybody there. So that's a really good question that you asked, Joan. Jane says, I guess it's using the right tool for the situation. You are spot on, Jane. And that's why we wanted to use Zoom meeting today, because I did want to be able to use the whiteboard. I did want to be able to get those ticks and crosses. And green tick, are you enjoying it? Are you finding it useful? Or red X, are you thinking it's too much to manage, I'm distracted and I can't cope? So green tick, are you thinking, yes, I'm enjoying it, I'm learning by using these different interaction tools? Or red X, if you think it's too much, it's too distracting, I can't cope. So that's on that participant panel. You can just go and click one of those. There's quite a few green ticks from you all and no red X's. So some of you might be in the middle. There's a few ticks on the whiteboard as well. And it's good to have a place to practice. Yeah, you can go and play with that. And Melanie, I know you can do the green ticks. So you've typed it in chat as well. Thank you. So largely, we're thinking, yes, this is useful and this is good. But as we say with Zoom webinars, if you had 100 or 200 or 300 people, those whiteboards would just get far too busy. So let me show you an example. This is what I call swim lanes. It's just a table in PowerPoint. And this is just my PowerPoint slides that I'm sharing with you. And what I do, I use this in my virtual classrooms. So what I would get people to do is go and type their name in, and you can do that if you want to, go and have a play and a practice, and then go and type in their answer. Now, this is really useful in virtual classrooms. Why am I saying in virtual classrooms and not in webinars? In chat, why am I saying this is a good activity in virtual classrooms but not in webinars? In chat, why am I making that difference? So Zara makes a good point. She's on a mobile, so some of the features are quite reduced. So you can't do annotations, typing or stamps, which is really annoying. But if we know that, then we can design for it. So we do have the backup of you can always just use the chat window, Zara, which you're doing great. So Liz says it's for check and learning for specific people. Yeah, so I could say the first 10 of you to put your name on this whiteboard get to use it. Or I could say, you know, those of you who've green ticked whatever my question was, you write on the whiteboard. I could do something like that. But you're right, Asley, I can't have too many lanes. And you're right, Mary, I have smaller numbers in the virtual classroom. So you're absolutely right. So I designed this for what, 10 people, so they could all go and put an answer in. And you're right, Mary, it shows engagement. AD says, great point on knowing mobile limitations. Perhaps cover this in the joining instructions for the best experience. Join the meeting on a computer, for example, or design with those limitations in mind. You're absolutely right about that, AD. And this is about knowing your audience. If you know you're going to have people on tablets and mobiles, you're right. You have to design with that in mind. Joan says, when I did the COLF course, they recommended about 8 for a virtual classroom. Yeah, 8 to 10 is exactly where we fit in. Mike, can you go and find that blog link, please, about the virtual classroom in numbers and copy that into the chat room for me, please? Because I've got a blog all about, or how can we deal with the types of numbers of people in our sessions. So please go and share that, please, Mike. Also, what have we got? Susie says the accessibility, someone who has a visual impairment. You're right, Susie, there's a whole other area there. You can get closed captions. You can also get screen readers and stuff like that, which is important. Asley says, WebEx can have multiple whiteboards. Can Zoom do that too? Zoom can do whiteboards, Asley, and it's not so much multiple whiteboards. It's either on or it's off, but I can save the whiteboard and I can clear the whiteboard in between times. So you can kind of reuse it multiple times. Oh, and Joan, yes, of course, Susie did a whole webinar on accessibility. I'd forgotten about that. So thank you very much for reminding us. So this is the type of activity I might run in a virtual classroom with up to 10 people. So as we've said, Zoom webinar is different. There aren't annotation tools for attendees, But what we would have if we had Zoom webinar is we would actually have a question panel, and we don't have that today. Luckily, I'm keeping up with the chat, but if not, I've got Mike, and he would help me out if there was any questions that I missed. Zara says, can you save the whiteboard? Yes, Zara, you absolutely can. So what I can do is I can save it. Also, you can save it too. If you have a look at your annotation toolbar, and if it's not switched on, you just need to move your mouse to the top of the screen. Click view options and annotate. Oh, you're on a mobile, Zara, so you don't have this. But Zara, for other people on a computer, on their annotation toolbar, there's a save icon. So it will just save what's called a PNG file, like a JPEG. It would just save that to your computer. So I can do that, and you can turn it on or off for attendees to do as well. Great question. Okay, so it's just about knowing your software and how it works and what is the right option for what you want to achieve. The second element I mentioned was sort of what you want people to do after the session, and that makes a real difference as to how you deliver your content and what engagement activities you do. Today we're on a webinar with lots of people, and I want it to be engaging, as one of the things I want you to do afterwards is actually know that it can be done, and that's kind of the point. And I think it's a really important thing to make sure that you're matching up not only your platform, if you have a choice, and the options, but also what you design to make sure it's easy for people. So I want to make sure that you're able to learn from others on these topics and gain confidence in what you know already. That's one of the other things that I want you to get out from this. So that's why we've gathered wisdom and experience already from the group in chat and put them on those whiteboards. And this is how the performance needs help drive the activities that I chose for this webinar. The last thing that I want to discuss today is about virtual classrooms. We've been through working and meeting remotely and webinars, and now we're on virtual classrooms. So do you run virtual classrooms which are facilitated with up to about 10 people? Green tick if you do. So green tick if you think, yep, that's me. It's all about the conversation, all about the discussions and the activities. And we have maybe 8, maybe 10 people, something like that. Or, as Melanie says, hoping to do so soon, if that's you in the future, pop that into the chat window. So green tick if you are already, or if you're thinking you will in the future. It could be due to the coronavirus issues we've got at the moment, or it could just be you're hoping to anyway. You can let us know in the chat window. Okay, so a load of you have done this, and maybe some of you are thinking that might be something you'll be doing in the future. Now, the biggest issue we hear from people, oh, and Visma as well in the future, thank you, Visma. The biggest issue we hear from people is that they can't see the people that they are training. And I understand that. I had to get used to that too, but I have got used to it. In the chat, let me know, what do you think is the key to getting over not being able to see those people that you're facilitating? So in the chat, what do you think is key to getting over that? What do you think is key? So we can't see people. What can we do to get over that? What's the key thing? Ashley says, imagine you're in a radio show. I love that. I'd love to spin some records for you right now, Ashley. I've got a very particular taste in music. It might not be for everyone. But I think you're right. In terms of, like AD was saying earlier on about using your voice, for instance, that's a really good way to think about it. Mary says establishing a connection so you know about individuals. Yes. If we hadn't had that disruption right at the beginning, I was going to ask you a few more things and try and establish a bit more of that connection. But you're right. But if we're doing this in a virtual classroom, we're doing a webinar today, remember, in a virtual classroom, hopefully you design that in and have that time. Natalie says opportunities for interaction so you can sense engagement levels. Yes, that's exactly what it is, Natalie. All of this interaction, whether it's in a webinar or a virtual classroom, helps me get to know you as an individual and you as a group. Now, in a webinar, I don't get so much about that as individuals, but when we're in a face-to-face classroom with maybe 8 to 10 people and we're trying to replicate that live online, we do have those opportunities, Natalie. Wonderful. Mark says the gallery view in Zoom means you can all see each other. So that's really useful. Yeah, we've got the webcams off today because we want to conserve bandwidth for everybody. But where possible, that's really great because you can see people smiling and nodding or just concentrating. It gives you a bit of that physical body language, which is really important. What have we got? AD says, look for other clues on how people, on how engaged people are. You're right, AD, and that's what these options for interaction are all about. We can use those green ticks anytime. We've actually got smiley faces, hands clapping. If you move your mouse to the more button, you've got a thumb up and thumb down or hands clapping. If you're on a computer, you have those options. You can go and play with those if you want to. And it's just about, are people sharing things and asking them in chat is another example. Thank you, AD. And a thumb up there from Melanie. Thank you, Melanie. Also, what we've got is Melanie says use names and asking for responses. I really like that. And we can use names in a virtual classroom really easily because quite frankly, they're there. They're easy. And we can ask people for responses. I could say, hey, Victoria, I'm going to unmute you next. And that just gives Victoria a little perk up and she's probably gone, what? And it kind of gives her a warning if I'm going to come to you next and unmute you. Don't worry, Victoria. We're on a webinar. I'm not doing that to you today. But it's the kind of thing, she's smiling, that you can do with people. Thank you, Victoria. Joan says it helps you to differentiate more if you ask something about each person, for example, where they live. Yeah, it really helps you to build up a little bit of a picture. So I know a few of you are in your shed or some of you are working at your kitchen table. Now, because there's 20 odd of us, I haven't quite plugged in, well, which person's at their shed, but that does start to help me build up a picture. Or as Mike says, AD is in bed. Yeah, I've tried to get that picture out of my head, Mike. Thanks for that you've added that in the chat. So Nicola also says in the chat, interaction every few minutes to keep attention and also engagement with your attendees. Nicola, you are spot on and I know you do this really well. That's something that when we think about our face-to-face training, normally we'd look around, we're observing people. And what we need to make sure we're doing is by having that engagement, those interactions designed every minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever you want to do, every few minutes, what we're doing there is we're using similar things to what we do face-to-face. We're reconstructing it. Okay, AD says some platforms tell you whether someone is actually looking at the webinar window or not. However, careful, some people are on another screen for good reason, looking something relevant up, making notes, etc. And Zara says Teams, which I've used, only allows 4 screens, also to 4 webinar screens. Thank you, Zara. So AJ makes a really good point. So WebEx has got an exclamation point. I think in Zoom there's a little kind of clock that comes up on some, depending on what you've got kind of turned on in your account. So, but you're absolutely right. We don't know whether we're boring them and they're in email, or quite frankly, we've said something that's really useful. And actually what they are is they're going and Googling it. So we just have to trust our adult learners. So thank you very much in that. Oh, and Ady's telling us he's not in bed. So maybe some people are in bed. He's in the shed. Okay. Yeah, your reputation is shot there. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. There's some really key points here. It is all about that interaction. If you take away nothing else from today, maybe the Zoom bombing, it's all about the interaction. Joan says, for information everyone, we converted this session from a webinar to a meeting and emailed everyone the link, but didn't require registration or a password. Joe tweeted a direct link to the meeting. So that's what it was. I didn't realize that was a direct link that was tweeted out. I thought that was the registration link. I see. So that's where the bombing came in. So there's a number of factors that all came together. I thought that was the registration link. That is very frustrating, Joan, but thank you for explaining. That's really useful to know. So it's about this interaction, and it's making sure everything from really tiny green tick questions through to whiteboards, discussions and breakout rooms that we haven't learned from, and we haven't kind of gone and used already today, but you might have used already. All of those things help you see your students in different ways. It helps you see your attendees' digital body language. And if you haven't read my blog about that already, Mike is going to share that in the chat window. So these are the main points that I wanted to cover in the session today. Obviously, there's much more we could discuss on these topics. Mike's done a great job of curating loads of links to our resources. And what he's going to do is he's going to share that in the chat window. So there's tons of resources there for you to go and look at, from I've never done it before and I'm just starting, through to if you're a little bit more advanced and you want some more nuance to your session. Oh, so Joan's saying, no, I did tweet a link to the website, so I'm puzzled. These things happen, Joan. These things happen. Okay, so at this point, I want to pause. I want you to allow loads of time for questions today. So if you've got a question, please go and pop that into the chat window. Let me pause here and come back to Asli. Asli, is there anything I've missed in the chat? Are there any observations that you have about the conversation so far?
No, I think that's been fantastic so far. I mean, in my head, I do have a lot of questions in terms of the principles of what you were talking about applies to any tool, really, whether you're using Zoom or not. And I guess as someone who's probably used a lot more tools than most of us here, I was just wondering what your view on different platforms, Zoom versus WebEx versus Connect, perhaps?
Okay, really good question.
The functionalities and everything.
Yeah, really good questions. A lot of people are at that point of being able to choose or wanting to know the difference. And as Jane says, it's a golden question. So do share other questions in chat and we'll come back to those, or comments, of course, or questions for each other. Mike is going to go and find a link to a podcast that we have, which is all about choosing your platform. So if you want to know a bit more detail, you can go and listen to that. I think the key thing is, or there's a few key things. One, there's what's the cost of the platform. Another is how easy is it to set up, and that will depend on whether you're buying it for you to help with your small business, or whether you need to implement this across multiple sites in a global business and work with IT. There are going to be different things that you have to take into account. Can people download something? Do you have to unlock a port on the VPN by IT? I don't know. So those are some things to take into account. I think in terms of the functions that you've got in the software, some of the big different ones, there's Zoom, obviously, and Joan, you make a great point there about reducing the bandwidth. Zoom's doing that. You've got Zoom, Adobe Connect, WebEx, and the Go-To suite are kind of the big four. Zoom is really good, and I'm recommending Zoom to most people in terms of we need to get online right now, just go, and it just needs to be easy. And that's what a lot of the world are doing. And as we saw with the Zoom bombing, a lot of the world are taking advantage of, but it is quick and easy to get up online and get going. Cisco WebEx, it's quite old technology. There's a lot it can't do. There's a lot it can do that's really good. But this is, I would say, with WebEx, it's something that if you already have Cisco in your organization, WebEx Training Center is the kind of thing you might use as part of that. I don't necessarily recommend it as a standalone platform. It's really expensive and they're just not investing in the updates at the moment. Adobe Connect, they are investing. They're doing massive updates at the moment. I think Adobe Connect, for my personal choice for virtual classrooms and when I want to co-host them or have Mike as my producer, that's my personal favourite, because it's got loads of, I call it funky stuff that you can do. There's something called a presenter only area, for example, which is a behind the scenes stage area where we can get things ready and we can chat with each other on typing, so that it's really easy to go and do. But some of that kind of, it takes a little bit more to learn Adobe Connect. It's not the kind of instant get online done, it's there that Zoom has. So it depends on what it is that you're doing. So yeah, Zoom does have a 30 to 40, it's a 40-minute limit on the free account, but Zoom is £11.99 a month, so it probably won't break the bank for some people, and then there's no time limit. Okay. Liz had said, I learn a lot by watching how others do it and by taking part. Who should I be a participant on webinars, etc., to learn from? You're very kind, apart from me. Thank you, Liz. The Learning and Skills Group webinars are really good. So if you go and follow Donald Taylor on Twitter or #LSG webinar on Twitter, they're really good to go and look at. And of course, the eLN webinars as well. AD says, what's your view on Google Hangouts as a platform for this stuff, Joe? AD, Google Hangouts has got some really good features. Again, a little bit like Teams. It was kind of originally there for meetings. It does have a whole load of other stuff it can do. And it also, as I understand it, it's really good for kind of school stuff as well. It links in with a lot of classroom stuff. And if you're using things like Google Documents, it's really good from that point of view as well. What I understand, I haven't used it recently, so it might have changed. What I think Google Hangouts doesn't do are the virtual classrooms bells and whistles that we might want to. Natalie says, how long do you think a virtual classroom could last before losing people's attention? Is 2 hours too long? Natalie, most of my sessions when we're running our training courses are 2 hours. And usually the feedback is, wow, that time went really quickly. But hopefully what you've seen today is I'm interacting with people throughout. On average, about every 2.5 minutes, I'm getting people to do something. So that time goes really quickly. But if you've got a 15-minute session, and like AD was saying earlier on, there's no interaction and the person's really monotone, that 15 minutes will be too long. So it's as long as it needs to be for the attendees, for the performance need, and you making it as wonderful as it can be. So I'd like to know from you people, what is your light bulb moment from today? So everybody, what is your light bulb moment from today? Let's go and use that whiteboard. And if you want to use the chat, you can of course do that instead. So if you prefer to use chat, please do that. If you want to use the whiteboard, please go and share what is your light bulb moment from today. What is something you've learnt, something you've experienced? I think we've all experienced something today. We've all learnt something new today. Yeah, Zara, it's that Zoom bombing. Is that a sad smiley face? I think it's a sad face. Yeah, surviving a Zoom bombing. Yeah, we certainly did. I was certainly trying to lock that down, but no, it just didn't work. Grace under pressure. You were all absolutely great at dealing with that, so well done. Using Zoom for the first time, well, welcome to Zoom. The Zoom bombing, setting up passwords, registering on future meetings and webinars. Yeah, it's all to do with those settings. We've learned some stuff about that. Joe wins the prize for staying cool under pressure. I'm not sure I felt like that, but if that's what came across, then phew. The pace of interaction has been great. Love how you keep us on our toes. Tuning out is not an option. Loving that. How interactive it can be. No excuse for webinars to be boring. The tools are there. Yes, they are. And the whole point of Live Online is to engage. Very, very good. And also, what have we got in the chat? Melanie's a Zoom first timer, and keep the questions going and interactions. That's great. Zara said, good to be aware of it. I think you mean the Zoom bombing and how to try and avoid it happening in the future. Yes, I sent an email to Joan, and she's just sharing those points. And Mike will share the link. I had a Facebook what did I have? A Facebook link that I shared, and you don't have to be friends with me on Facebook if you don't want to, that's fine. But I did share something there, and there was some good chat on there, but also we'll put something about this on our community too. So you've got some links to our community. And you don't need to see a host in a webinar. That's another good one on the whiteboard there. Thank you. And last one, Annette says how interactive it can be. I missed some of this due to a phone call. Will you be sending the link? Yes, I'm absolutely certain that will be happening, and that will all be sent out. So thank you very much. You've got the community link there. Mike, that's not the right link. You have got that wrong. That's not very good, is it? What you can do is go and join our community, go and have a look at all of our resources. But I want to say thank you to you, and also hand back to Asli, just as Mike puts the right link in the chat. Asli, back to you.
Well, Joe, thank you very much, and Mike as well. It's been great, and certainly I learned a few things, and I do actually run virtual classrooms every so often on WebEx, but still. Thank you for all of you for dialing back, and again, our apologies for the Zoom momming. That we all learned something from it, definitely. This is recorded, as I said at the beginning, and we will be getting the recording out on YouTube shortly. Thank you all very much.